The other thing with a global Super League is, think about it from a fan's point of view. Like, they're already paying an absolute fortune to go and watch Arsenal away, travelling from Newcastle. Imagine having to travel from, I don't know, from Liverpool to fucking the middle of nowhere every week. Do you know what I mean? Like Spain or something like that. You're paying flights, you're paying ticket money every week.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's sustainable from a fan's point of view.
What could be interesting though is maybe it moves more towards
Imagine a pay-per-view.
One at a time?
Right. A pay-per-view situation where you're paying to watch the game. I'd still watch it. I'd pay for that game.
Yeah, 100%. But you've got the Champions League for that if you're not going to go to the games.
And if you're talking about ones we can do public gatherings again, the fans are going to want to be involved. But then maybe you come to something that's more like a Super Bowl setup. So maybe again, the top tier is like the old idea of a pyramid, and maybe the top teams don't play every week, but you know the lower league they play more, and maybe that's the thing where you do get other leagues where you can watch it. But then there's maybe only a finite number of teams in the top, and maybe they only play once every few weeks to once every month, and therefore you can pay to go.
So what happens to the football?
Maybe it impacts the way international football works. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here as to how this could work. And the idea is I think our idea of the construct of the current makeup of the professional football game would be smashed to pieces. We would move towards something that we see usually in the States. And how do these things set up? And I think it would be more, the full halftime shows and shit. Do you know what I mean? I think we have more
will change. I think football, as every other kind of industry is changing, it will change. I think this is going to be. You just don't coronavirus it's a really, really tough conversation to have because we don't know what we don't know, and looking forward is obviously impossible to do. But imagine that you cannot sell seats, and imagine that clubs, lower leagues are dying, but they've still got quality players that could probably play, reserves or whatever if they're young enough for bigger clubs. I just don't know where football's going. Is lower league football going to finish because of not being able to sell tickets? If that happens and social distancing becomes part of the norm and everyone's trying to stay 2 meters and wearing masks and boiler suits or whatever, then it becomes the gulf between the rich clubs and the poor clubs becomes huge.
I think it maybe actually democratizes it, Ali. If you take away the stadium element of it, perhaps they're the freemium model. And as you go up the leagues, it becomes more premium. And you pay a higher premium for each league. And the advertising thing pays for free. The freemium model of streaming pays for you're able to watch. Say, for example, you want to watch football in this country, you can get the lower league football on the freemium model, and the advertising's paying for that. But then you pay a higher premium to watch a higher tier of football. If everything's live streamed, that probably democratizes it a lot more than the state. It's a stadium issue that's often the point, right? If we're not able to watch stadiums,
advertising is going to be from the top to the bottom. So advertisers won't probably miss out on the top. Liverpool played Man U. They probably won't miss out on that opportunity. But the lower you get, how are you going to pay these players? I'm struggling to understand if we look at worst case scenario, and I'm not just talking about football. This goes for almost every sport that makes money out of people coming through the doors, rugby, everything. Once you go into a situation where there's no money at the bottom, how are you going to pay your players? And how are you going to put players on contracts or semi-pros or whatever? It's because people go to watch these games. So are we looking at a different model of football where the leagues become more competitive because the big money's gone to their Super League that's in Europe, or a European Super League or whatever? Those big teams have gone. So a team like Newcastle can actually win the British League, or all that kind of stuff. And then that becomes, we want to watch the British League and we'll watch that. Yeah, we might watch those games, but there's the league we want to watch, and they get their own advertising and stuff like that. Just creates
possibly. And can you get promoted to the Super League, and can you get relegated back into your national leagues? And maybe
I mean, I agree with what you're saying, but there are still fans of lower league clubs that will want to watch their team.
Hmm.
So why not charge? Say, for example, you have like a Netflix subscription, right? And you pay 20 quid a month for the Premier League Netflix, right?
Yeah.
And then you pay 15 quid a month for the Championship, and so on, down to 5 quid a month or $6.99 or whatever you want to pay for League 3. There'll still be people watching that, and you'll probably find it's enough to pay the players. No?
And again, this is what I was getting at with the freemium model. That's how Spotify works. Why do people have Spotify accounts? Because it's free. But after a while, you get sick of the ads and you end up going, do you know what? I'll take a tier up.
Yeah.
So your thing is, even if you support one of the big clubs, but you're like, do you know what? I'm not paying 20 quid a month or whatever it is. I'm not paying it. But do you know what? I'll have the app and I'll watch it because I'm going to watch the freemium stuff because it's free. Do you know what? I'm in the mood to watch my team now. Do you know what? I'll take a tier, and next thing you know, people that weren't going to pay for it are still engaged because of the freemium model. So the same sort of idea, though, I think will come into some form of on-demand streaming. I think that will be what it'll be.
The only thing is, with that is that the likes of Sky and BT Sport will be fucked. Because there'll be no TV, right?
They already are. People are engaging with fan chat. Well, what we're doing right now, look, these other channels out there that have become...
Let's be fair, Mike. Sky are not fucked. Sky have got plenty money.
I see the point.
In terms of influences, though, it's a lot more democratized than it's ever been because they used to have
There's a lot more money going into channels like Coppa, channels like YouTube channels where there's like Poet and Rouge or whatever. There's a lot more money going into that than Sky always going to buy it. But Amazon are coming to the market now. Amazon, Amazon have the money to blow out Sky and BT out of the water. And if
the Premier League had any sense, they'd launch a streaming service themselves, cut out the middleman, so they're not paying Sky.
Do you know they always said this?
10, 15 quid a month.
They always said this, G, is what the record label should have done, but sort of fighting the Napster situation. If they'd have got ahead of the curve, they could have been the Spotify themselves instead of having to. And that's exactly it. It's like, do you embrace the change or do you fight against it, holding on to the older model? Do you fight change or do you, oh, well, okay, that's where it's going. We better make sure we have the patent on that situation. Yeah, you're right.
Very, very interesting. I think the situation that we're in, there's going to be changes. I think there's going to be changes, and I'd be very intrigued to see how certain clubs react. I want to see how players react to this pandemic. I need to say it properly. And I want to see how clubs react to it, but I also want to see how football reacts to it. And if there's less money kicking about in football, which I don't think there is, because you're still going to get your fans buying the shirts. If it's not a case of you're buying tickets, you're still buying shirts, you're still showing your team or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there will be a change. I think that change is going to be an interesting change, and I want to see how money influences that change over like Newcastle United. Like, someone's coming in to buy a club. Are they buying 80% of it? Is that what it is? 340 mil for 80%, or are they buying the whole thing?
Something like that. There's a consortium, isn't there, that's doing something, and then there's that woman that's already there, whose name escapes me, but she's going to be like the figurehead of the club and the system. And I think she's got somewhere between 15 and 17% of the shares.
There's a big consortium behind her.
And then the consortium are going to own the rest of the shares, but she's going to be like the front person.
Yeah, okay. So are they buying a club at the wrong time, or are they buying the club at a perfect time? I don't know.
Who knows? Like the value of the club might go up, it might go down. You don't know, do you? Because it might end up.
Do you think we'll be in a situation, guys, where it will be almost there will be really two models? There will be the model of the team now that are privately funded and therefore able to limit the loss of what's going on commercially, and they'll be what your Cities and your Chelseas have been, or then your clubs right now that are actually doing kind of Chelsea a bit of an anomaly because they're actually doing this right now, but more, I guess, what say Man United are doing right now, which is trying to turn to its youth team again. You think there'll be two
Say
models?
that again?
So do you think there'll be two models predominantly going forward? One being just still privately funded and can spend, and then everyone else will have to go this route of going to their youth teams, like having to invest.
Youth's a really good one, because if a club like Southampton held on to their youth, they would be unbelievable.
Yeah, they've had some good players.
But and then
Crewe Alex as well, going down the leagues, they've had some amazing players that get snapped up by all the big players, all the big clubs in the northwest. Like
Who's that?
Crewe Alex, Crewe Alex,
yeah.
they're one of the best academies in the country historically for years and years. But they're a second division club, first division club. Whereas if it was all down to bringing through youth and holding on to it, and that was the only way you played, they'd probably be in the Premier League.
West Ham.
Yeah.
Look at the players West Ham have had. They're always the ones that get me. The Rio Ferdinand, Frank Lampard, Joe Go. They had like Michael Carrick did so many that they brought through from like their academy that again they usually would bring them through and get them going, but within a couple of years they
get snapped up. Now the opposite of that is a club like Man City, and they've got a youth system. And their youth players probably won't really play for Man City. Like Phil Foden should probably be out on loan, playing Premier League football 90 minutes a weekend, every weekend. Like he's good enough to play in the Premier League, but they won't give him that game time. He can't. I think
he will get that game. Sorry, just an offshoot. I think he will get that game time next season because of David Silva retiring. But but usually they won't. I think he's good, and he's so good that he'll get it. But you have to be elite almost to get it. Yeah. But sorry, go on, Ali.
Even if Foden does, how many other youth players does that club have? Yeah. So the issue is that it might work for Southampton where they can. It hasn't worked for Southampton because they keep selling. But what I'm saying is that if the model came to what you're saying, Mikey, whereas you had the big spenders, then you had the clubs that relied on youth, the big spenders youth team would be nowhere. Like they would have to keep selling their youth players to a club that is trying to develop their own. So it's a tough one because City probably have a great youth setup and they probably have great talent coming through. But Chelsea were similar, and if they hadn't gone through what they went through, we wouldn't have really seen that talent as early as we did. And those guys are good enough. They're clearly good enough to play in the Premier League.
I think I think it's one of them. You have to talk about the ideal world versus the reality, don't you? I think in an ideal world there would be some form of legislation to control, to make it fair, to democratise it. How certain clubs are able to operate. Like that's one of the reasons why I love watching the World Cup, because no matter what, you can't buy a team.
Yeah.
That's the players you've got, right? One of the things we all love it is because there's an inherent fairness in it. Like, literally it is like, these are the players, that's from the country, you're from that country, that's the club you support, so that's the country you support. Even whatever you think about your country in terms of economic system or its political system.
It's so pure, you're right.
Football team, because that's where you're from. And there's an inherent fairness to it. And, would in another sort of system, would it be a case of going, there should be certain geographical limitations to players you should play, but that's an ideal world scenario. I don't think we'll ever get that, but I think there's something beautiful because of that, because the World Cup doesn't do that. You generally watch it and it is somewhat fair.
Yeah, but Athletic Bilbao do that, don't they? They only pick players that are born in that region. Yeah, they only pick those players, and they've done all right.
Done okay.
And,
they've got an identity, right? People come into that club, know what it is, and they've got a consistency. But I would, with Barcelona not really considering at some point going down the route of almost like a Catalan national team that was maybe a spark to.
There is a Catalan national team. Obviously, they're not ratified because it's not technically a country, but they play friendlies every year. I lived there for a year, so I know a bit about it. But they, especially when Barcelona's team from a few years ago were coming through, they could probably field a team that might have won a World Cup, to be fair. So
that kind of system, to me, again, you're getting into the world of idealism versus, kind of the reality of the situation. But for me, that would be the utopia of what it could be. But that's what makes the World Cup so special, because the World Cup, no matter what the club games do in the World Cup, is still that. There's a purity to that competition that you just can't. That's the thing. We're so far the other way where the money talks. Because even the traditional clubs, like you said, you can argue to say, well, they've earned the right to be that. But also, there's a lot of Man United had the fortune to have that dominance during the Premier League era of it forming. So, that could have easily been Liverpool, that could have easily been anyone else that blew up and with a dominant team as all this money came in, which meant they were projected around the world and had all this income. It's just, again, you're right. So the other clubs say, well, what? So we can never compete then unless we get private investment. So that argument is actually very, very relevant as well.
Open the door to a lot of private investors, though. So, say for example, there is a club that's doing really well in, say, the British League, and it doesn't have private investor, but they've got a good fan base or whatever. A private investor has only got so many clubs they can pick from once. A private investor could sell to another private investor, but you could also just go to the league and be like, look, do you know what, this club is something a bit like what the Saudis have done with Newcastle. Look at league, which club isn't owned? Okay, that club, good club. And the other thing I want to talk about just before we wrap up or whatever
can I just make one quick point about how you're talking about private owned clubs and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Why not go the other way and put a cap on what clubs can spend, and in terms like total spend and what they spend on the wage bill, like they have in American sports?
I think that's the way it will need to go, because this financial fair play, like you said, is not it's not a model that actually works. Even when clubs get fined, they're happy to pay the fine. But what might need to happen is spending caps and caps.
Because I feel like that's the only way to make it a level playing field. Set the spending cap at something that everybody can afford.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you just see like who's with that budget. It will bring the players' value down, because see, if you value your player, say for example you've got Pogba at Man U and you value him at 100 million, but each club has a spending cap of 110 million. All of a sudden, you're probably going to be trying to do a trade deal. Be like, okay, like we'll give you like 30 million.
It will change the value. I mean, but then when you go back to the Premier League era in the 90s, Alan Shearer went for a world record of 15 million. What's Alan Shearer worth today? That's just the state of the money that's in football at the time. Alan Shearer is a £100 million player now. Do you know what I mean? So it'll all be relative. It'll all be relative.
Because I think that part of football is just running away, where the players' values, like how do you put a value on Messi now? Like you just like a club might be happy to pay 200 million for that guy because he is unbelievable, but that part of football will keep running away. So
maybe that's a part of it, Ali, where, for example, it'll be going forward that, okay, you talk about spending caps, you can talk about these kind of things, but then maybe the players do get a slice of their image rights in a different model that goes. But then, if you're a player that's worth all that money, but you're getting, say, 50 grand a week, even that, we're talking like that it could be a case where no one gets more than, even 30, 40, whatever it is, but they're like, but how much? So, okay, how does that work? Are they able to do different brand deals, but it's the players that are actually getting those rights? That's what we need to do.
Our shirt sales, if someone buys a shirt with our number on it, like we want a bit, blah, 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 then it might go that way, where the club's like, okay, this is your bonus, this is this, this is that. So your wage is set this, but there's a win bonus, and then there's a cup bonus, and then there's a this, which probably do exist already. But what I'm saying is that they might come more into play, where a player can really top up his earnings, but they have to do it by winning and winning and winning.
Yeah.
Because more
and
teams
I feel like the club shouldn't be penalised for being successful in the past. Like, I feel like it should be a level playing field going forward so that clubs can rise. But like the clubs that have been historically successful might start ahead, but the point is, then they can't just continue to go ahead purely because of their infrastructure. It should be a case of going, right, that you've earned the right to be there, but money now can't keep you there. Like how you use the infrastructure you've created, how you use your coaches, how good the coaching is, how good the players are, those things are determined that you continue to go on that upward trajectory. If someone else outplays you, outcoaches you, outthinks you, they should go past you, not to go, but then if that happens, I'll just chuck a bunch of money at it and undo everything they've done. Do you know, that shouldn't be a possibility. And I'm not saying that always what happens, because, you know, some people don't spend money right, but it shouldn't even be a possibility. And I think that's right. You know, the clubs that have become, have built that, because you've got to remember, like clubs like Manchester United, like Liverpool, like Leeds United, like Aston Villa, they became that dominant back in 1960s when there was a player wage cap. There was a maximum you could pay for a player. So they did do it in that era. They built this that way. So actually, if you're a club that, do you know what I mean? You're in that position because you built that, then you should start ahead, but you shouldn't be just able to stay ahead by holding other people down by blitzing them with money that you've got from some skewed marketplace. I think that's where we can get to a model that represents some of these morals again, like some of this ethos about actually being the best rather than just being able to secure the market. And again, financial doping, let's call it what it is. Financial doping.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, that's what it is. Because, you know, it's the equivalent to, you know, pumping yourself full of stuff and winning a race. You're like, do you know what I mean? It's not a competition. The only competition it is with other people who can do the same.
There are other places that these clubs can spend money, though. Like, I'm not saying that the club shouldn't earn the money. Look, if you've got a fan base that can earn that money, we can't take money out of football because football is it's a blockbuster every weekend times 20, right? So there's not just one blockbuster film, but you can't take the money away, but the clubs can invest that money elsewhere within football.
They can do it more responsibly.
And you can have feeder clubs and you can have all that kind of stuff where you're actually not just looking after Man City or looking after Man City, but they're also looking after 10 other clubs in Manchester that are playing grassroots football and all that kind of stuff, where they've actually, the money could go back into football. It could go back into the Man City brand, and they can keep earning and they can keep making the money. I don't think these private
they can build businesses from it, and
the club can't make money before.
I think they can build businesses from it. They can build profit. They can use it as a platform to build other businesses, but they shouldn't be able to just skewer it back into making themselves entirely dominant. They should have to invest a certain amount into their youth and actually showcase that this youth gets a chance to play. That would be a huge thing. It would be great for the international game as well, that young players around the world are getting into teams, but also then they shouldn't be able to then just go and steal other teams' youth players, because then the same stuff happens there. And that's where you have some form of limit of. So there should be a certain quota for how many of the youth team players get through, and how much of that youth team are actually from a certain postcode. I think that would be it. So you go, okay, no, you can have great players from other countries. You can't just stop freedom of movement. But what you can do is to say, but it's your responsibility to meet these quotas and to actually hit the numbers. And you know what?
Did they not have something like that with first team squads in the Premier League?
They do. I've got so many British players or English qualified players.
But I'm talking about going way, way back. You used to only be able to have 3 players from outside the EU, I think, in your whole squad.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
I remember during the Champions League team. I remember watching the United team back then, having to choose between Giggs or Schmeichel, because it wasn't even. It was non-British. No, it was non-English. So
that was in Europe.
Yeah.
That was in
that. I remember that.
Like in the Premier League, it was like players from outside of Europe or outside the European Union or something. You were only allowed 3 of them. And in the Champions League, I'm sure it was foreign players. You were only allowed 5 in your squad or something. But so that's going back to a model that's been used before.
I feel like it should be a case, G, where you can have like younger players coming in from other countries, because you don't want to make it, we don't want to be a bunch of Brexit FCs there either. Do you know what I mean? You want to have players being able to come and challenge it. So absolutely in that. But I think it's a case where then the quotas are done in a way that, okay, international players can come over, but go and scout them early and bring them over and set them up and develop them and bring them through. But also you still have to work within a certain quota of going, but you're also working with a set of players from this actual catchment area as well, not just go in and again, because you can cheat that way. Like, the way Barcelona do it, it's to take everyone's best youth players, and it's like, that still is cheat. That still is using your influence to just go and steal everyone else's youth players.
Yeah.
So they need to find, they have to have certain regulations in place that mean that you can have players from other places and you can use your brand identity. You can do that, but you can't do it to the point where you just make it you don't completely obscure the competition. That's the balance. What that looks like is probably something we're not going to settle today. But the point is, even thinking about these things means that, there is solutions that can be done, and it's probably not something you're going to do in a year. But do you know what? If you were to implement these things with this ethos over time, in 20-25 years, it could be a very different landscape.
Because I don't think football, in its current capacity, I think clubs with big money are just running away with it. I just don't think it's, and a new club comes with big money and then they start running away with it. Like, I think the competitive edge is being taken away from leagues. Like this year in the Premier League, last year in the Premier League, second and third were 25 points apart. Just the year before, when there was a big gap again, like, it's just some of the competition is just I don't know if it's entirely money. I'm not pinning that entirely on money, but I would guarantee you, if every club was spending the same kind of money, it would be a bit more competitive at the top and at the bottom.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.